Ask any old guy who's been working on crews for Santa Maria Style BBQ, and they will tell you it's about hospitality and it's about feeding a crowd.
Hi, I'm Ashley Cheney, and this is the Dear Food Podcast. Have you ever noticed how it seems like pretty much everyone likes to talk about food? Yeah, I've noticed that too. And it seems like the best way to get to know someone is to actually ask them about food, whether that's on the red carpet, like I've had the chance to do, or whether that's just talking to someone in line at the grocery store. Some of the easiest and most illuminating conversations I've ever had have been about food. So this podcast is actually that. Really just connecting people through the stories that we tell about food. We'll use food to take us back to the places that we have remembered so fondly, whether that place is just a really special time in your life, or whether that's actually using a memory to transport us around the world. Food will take us there and make us feel all kinds of warm and fuzzy along the way. So let's dig in. Hi everyone, and welcome back. How y'all doing? Boy, it has been a wild week for me. Very, very randomly, I had a video go viral, totally unrelated to food, but it was just kind of an interesting start to the week. And it meant that I got to do some media interviews. So if you are by chance here because you heard me on one of those shows, welcome to Dear Food. We're so excited to have you here. And if you are a regular listener, welcome back. We are going to one of my very favorite places with today's episode, and that is the Central Coast of California. So San Luis Obispo is right in the Central Coast of California, and it's what I call my hometown. It's not actually where I grew up, but it's where I spent my summers with my grandparents. It's where I went to college, and it's certainly the place I think that holds my heart for many, many reasons. But it is just a wonderful place to visit for so many different attractions. It has beautiful beaches and all kinds of gorgeous, mountains and rolling hills, and of course a wonderfully popping, lively food and drink scene. So I was incredibly excited to find today's guest, Jaime Lewis, through the podcasting world. Turns out she produces a podcast called Consumed. It is a wonderful podcast that is dedicated to the Central Coast food and drink scene. So I was listening to a couple of her episodes and I was like, wow, this woman is amazing. She is a great writer, storyteller. She's got an awesome voice. She's just like it, and I have to have her on the show. She was kind enough, obviously, to oblige. And when we were talking about what food or restaurant or whatever we were going to feature on the show this week, I had all these ideas of places that I loved to eat at when I was, growing up sort of there, going to college there. And just in talking to Jaime, it became very clear that there was actually a much more important story that needed to be told. And this is kind of a first for the show. We're not just talking about our memories of a place. We are really talking about an important conversation around the Santa Maria Style BBQ that we know today. And if you don't know of it, we're going to really break it down for you. But there's actually some really important cultural implications around this food that I honestly wasn't aware of, that she explains so perfectly to us. Real quick, please, please, please make sure you are subscribed to this show on Apple Podcast and that you are sharing it with friends. It's the easiest way to make sure you don't miss an episode. It's totally free, and it really means a lot to an independent podcaster like moi. Okay, that's it. I swear. Let's dig in to today's episode with Jaime Lewis. Jaime, welcome to the show. So good to have you here.
Thank you.
We were, just before we started recording, talking a little bit about our backgrounds, and the way I found you is you are a San Luis Obispo native, or I guess Napomo native. Tell me about, kind of where you grew up and what brings you to the Central Coast.
Yeah, well, I was born in Ventura, but my parents relocated, like so many people did, from Southern California up to Central California. So I grew up in Napomo in a really, this is before there was anything. I think there weren't even any stoplights at the time. So this was really rural, sandy Napomo, the dunes nearby. And then, like I was saying, I couldn't get out of here fast enough. It was too small for me. And so I ended up going to college in New York till I graduated. And then for some extra time after that working. And then I ran out of money, and it was during the tech bust, and tried to get a job in San Francisco, tried to get a job in LA. Couldn't, came home and was tending bar at Rose's Italian restaurant in Pismo Beach.
Yeah, everybody knows that place. Oh, that's amazing. Sure. It's so funny that you say you wanted to get out of SLO, because I think for so many people, it's the opposite experience. People go to college, maybe at Poly, and they just want to do anything that they can to stay on the Central Coast because it's such a lovely place. And so your career kind of had a really interesting trajectory, and it looked like it's brought you back now to the Central Coast. So can you tell us, you have what I think is probably as close to my dream job as I can get, which is you're a food and drink journalist. And you've traveled all over the world. Can you just kind of tell us a little bit? We'll get into our first taste segment here in a second, but your career is so interesting. I just have to get a little bit of backstory. How did that transpire? So you're back working at Rose's, and how does that come about to be a food and drink journalist?
Gosh, I mean, that road is really circuitous. It goes all over the place. But the long story short is, while I was tending bar at Rosa's at night, I was working at Boo Boo Records during the day in downtown San Luis Obispo. And I ended up meeting my husband that way, who was a recent Cal Poly grad. And I actually moved up to San Francisco, got a great job in orchestra management. And he followed me up. And then when we got married, he said, I want to go back to slow. And I was like, no, are you serious? And I was in orchestra world for quite a while. And I loved wine. And so I started studying to become a sommelier. And I, on nights and weekends, was with the index cards and the textbooks, just making myself crazy. And I ended up passing, and I have a level 3 advanced certification through the Wine and Spirits Education Trust.
Yeah, that's no joke. That SOM course is no joke. Wow.
But then my husband and I, before I even found out if I passed the exam, my husband and I quit our jobs, and we traveled to Italy for 6 months to work on farms and in vineyards and live with Italian locals. And then we ended up living in New Zealand for 6 months, working, he in a brewery tasting room and I for a restaurant across the street.
Okay, so still very much in the food and drink industry, just in a different capacity. When did the writing really kick in for you? When did you become a food and drink journalist?
When I was living in New York, I was an architecture history major, random, from my college, and I had a job working for an architecture magazine. And I ended up realizing, okay, I love architecture, but what I really love is writing and publishing and editing. So that was a little side thing that I just happened to really love. And I'd always been a strong writer, but I wasn't one of those people who pictured herself being a writer when she was 8 years old. So when I fell in love with wine and started training to work in restaurants, I realized I don't want to work in restaurants. I don't want to stay up late at night, and I don't want to work the floor and deal with bad customers and tips and all that. So I decided to really combine my love of writing with my love of wine, just reading tons of different writers. This was the beginning of blogging, so reading lots of blogs. And to be totally honest, I started a blog for our travels simply because I knew I needed to have a place to bank up my writing. Mm-hmm. And even though no one was paying me and hardly anybody was reading it, it was really key to me discovering, okay, first of all, I can do it. I can meet my own deadlines. And that the people who did read it really loved it. And I ended up getting a job right away in wine marketing as a writer, a copywriter, when we came home.
Oh, wow. And so did you come straight back then to the Central Coast? Is that what you call
Yes.
them? Yeah. And that's, of course, where our stories intersect, because I found you through, the podcast world, which, of course, you produce an amazing podcast called Consumed. It's fantastic. And I'm going to be linking below in the show notes for everybody to go check it out. It's specifically for the Central Coast, which is my hometown, my heart, my love, my favorite place in the world. And much to your probably dismay, I'm like, how can I get back there? How can I?
No, not at all. I get it now. I totally get it now. Yeah. And I've tried to spend so many of my days championing what happens here. I totally am on board now.
Well, you do such a great job, and we are going to be dedicating our episode today to one of the culinary hallmarks of the Central Coast, which is, of course, Santa Maria style barbecue. But before we get into the food of the day, we start our show off every episode by asking our guests what's called the first taste. So, Jaime, do you remember the first food you ever tasted?
Yeah, and it's funny, when you asked that, I knew immediately what it was, but it's a very odd choice for me. The first thing I remember eating, my mother grew up in New Jersey. And so we went out there when I was 3. my mom, my dad, and I to visit her old friends. And we ended up in Sag Harbor in the Hamptons. I remember sitting there and eating, like picking every single bit of flesh off of a lobster with my dad. And
Yeah.
just butter and lobster. Okay, so the crazy thing about that is I don't admit this a lot because of my occupation, but I don't love seafood.
Oh.
I kind of actually dislike seafood.
Uh-oh.
I know. And so the fact that I just picked that lobster clean is a really bizarre thing, but that's the first thing I remember eating.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that's an amazing first taste memory, first of all, because I love lobster. I mean, that's like, I mean, it's a huge treat for most people. But do you
Yeah,
remember, like how old you were when you were having this?
I had to have been 3.
3. Wow. And what's particularly remarkable about that is I think for a lot of people, particularly Americans who aren't used to seeing, like when we eat chicken, we're not seeing the animal. So
Right,
lobster, you are seeing, the shell, the exoskeleton of the animal. So I think I always
right.
kind of marvel at kids that have this bravery to eat something. I mean, I know it's a lobster, it's not that scary looking, but were
Yeah.
your parents really good eaters and did they sort of encourage eating? What was that like?
Yeah, I wouldn't say my mom's a great eater, and she would, I think, readily admit to that. She says, "Oh no, I'll eat anything," and then we're like, "Okay, sweet potatoes, fish, dates." Like it's kind. She likes cereal and Twinkies and things like that. Which who doesn't? But my dad is he's a good cook and an adventurous eater, and he is a fisherman, and so
Oh no, you're breaking his heart.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times he tried to feed me something and I would taste it. And then it's just not, I wouldn't order it. I have had really good, like fried fish tacos and they were good, but it's still, I'd rather have, oh man, I'm coming out of the closet here.
No, I love it.
How dare you?
Well, I know. It's so fun because I almost always find that like chefs or people who are really intimately in the food and wine, well, food industry for this podcast, I'd say 90% of the time they come from parents who didn't really have a lot of eating experience. And I wonder if it's just like
Mhm.
sort of tilting back in the other direction. But so your dad is a fisherman. Did you go out and fish with him when you were a kid? And was that like on the Central Coast? Is that where he grew up as a fisherman? Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. And I should be totally clear. That's not what he did for a living, but it was his passion was
Sure.
either surf fishing or for a time he had a really amazing boat. He would, he'd launch off of Port San Luis here in Avila Beach. And I remember the day my brother became a man in some respects was the day we were all out there fishing and there was a lingcod that was eating another fish on my dad's line and he yelled, "Get the gaff." And my brother took this gaff and speared this thing and pulled it up. And my dad just looked at him like, "You're a man now."
Yeah,
So
geez, not just a man, but like Tom Hanks Castaway style. That's amazing. I'm envious because I split my time. I call San Luis Obispo my hometown, but really I didn't actually move out to San Luis Obispo full time until I graduated high school. So I would spend summers in San Luis Obispo and I have the best memories being at Port San Luis, Avila, all the beaches. And so I can't imagine what it was like to actually grow up there and have that. I feel like the Central Coast breeds the happiest, nicest people. I don't know why. Do you have any insight as to
yeah.
why everybody's wonderful from the Central Coast?
Gosh, that's such a big question. I remember somebody saying once that she thought all Cal Poly students had kind of like scrubbed faces and just, clean and wholesome. If I'm perfectly honest, I think that there is I think that we have started to believe our own press a little bit too much on that
Mm-hmm.
happiness thing. There are people who are suffering here just like anywhere else. And the fact that it's been called the happiest city in North America by Oprah has been hard for a lot of people, I think, me included. It's like, well, if you're upset about something or if you're suffering from depression or anxiety or whatever, loss, grief, there's this backstory of, well, how can you be sad? This is the happiest place on earth, And so I think that doesn't always do great service to residents here. That being said, we have the most beautiful food scene here. It's abundant. The weather is such that we have year-round produce, proteins, grains, wine, everything happens all year long, and almost all of our farmers markets occur all year long.
Yeah.
So we have that. We have all these incredible flavors. We have a really nice diversity here with Latino foods, tons of great Mexican restaurants, not really in San Luis Obispo City per se, but lots of good Mexican food. And we have farm to table stuff. But then we also have, this beautiful weather, these beaches. We have incredible wine country, beautiful downtowns that are walkable and, just sweet places. It's almost impossible to get a job here. So that makes it very desirable, I think, but really tough. And it's a bedroom, not a bedroom community, but a retirement community. I think, I can't remember what the numbers are, but it is so popular for people moving from outside the area who want more, what they call a slower pace of life and a quieter kind of spot. So,
well, I think everything you just described it's so easy to see why it's a wonderful destination and also why it can be tricky to settle and find that happiness, that equilibrium. But you're certainly doing it. And some of the things that you highlighted and the reasons why the Central Coast is so amazing is, of course, the food scene. So let's go ahead and dive in, if you are ready, to our food of the day, which is Santa Maria Style BBQ. And I'm so glad that you wanted to talk about this, because I will always say, let's say I'm traveling anywhere. Let's say I'm traveling back to Virginia and some place on the menu has a tri-tip sandwich or a steak. I don't even know if they'll say tri-tip sandwich, but I'll be thinking in my head, great, I'm going to get a tri-tip sandwich like I'm used to from Slow. And it comes out some abomination of not at all what I'm looking for, both in flavor, both in cut. Like, I don't even know how they can call it tri-tip. Can we start with what is Santa Maria Style BBQ?
Santa Maria Style BBQ has its roots in the mid to late 19th century. It goes back far, far farther than a lot of people realize. And, the tri-tip thing is interesting because that's what people think of for Santa Maria Style BBQ, but it's really not tri-tip. That became something much later. It always started with top sirloin. So the roots of it are Spanish Mexican vaqueros living in Alta, California, long before the Europeans had moved west from the East Coast, long before, 1849, there were people living here who were rancheros, and they inherited these land grants from the Mexican governor. And we're talking like upwards of, 8,000, 10,000 acres.
Wow.
That were gifted to people to settle here, and they started ranching cattle. And Santa Maria in particular, it happened all up and down the Central Coast, but in Santa Maria, there's something really ideal about that community because it has this confluence of rivers there. So there's fresh water for raising cattle. And it, very flat, just a great place where they could do that. And then for these big fiestas, for big parties, they would dig a hole in the ground. They would pull down the native willow, long, spears, for lack of a better word, from the willow trees and hook all of this slaughtered beef onto those willow poles and cook them slowly over red oak poles. So there's a lot of stuff here that's very indigenous to where we live. It's the willow trees and it's the red oak, because white oak gets really ashy. So red oak burns really slow. And then the top sirloin, and then pinquito beans, which is another story, but there's a whole menu of items that has come to be kind of, it's become codified here, but it all starts with the beef.
My mouth is just ajar because I did not know everything. I learned so much in what you just said, but I didn't know that willow trees were native to what I call Santa Maria. So I guess maybe Santa Maria wasn't a town yet, or I wasn't even sure the town that you mentioned. So the Santa Maria Style BBQ is about the way it's cooked, the cut of meat or the spice, or a conjunction of all those things?
It's all those things. Yeah. I think when people think of Santa Maria Style BBQ, if you know anything about barbecue here, West Coast style, you know that it is done over those red oak coals and that it's slow. And a lot of people think of a Santa Maria Style BBQ rig as something that has that screen that you can wind up and wind down. Growing up, that was just a barbecue to me. I did not know that was something specific to here. You see those the grates with the pulley in public parks everywhere. You see them in church parking lots. That's the way we do it here. So growing up, Napomo what is it? It's, 10 miles away from Santa Maria. It's where we did all of our grocery shopping. I'm basically a Santa Maria native.
Yeah, that barbecue that you're describing, you're so right. I hadn't even realized that that was almost like a culture shock when I did move out to California, because I didn't realize, if any of my listeners don't know what we're talking about, it's like a big size looking barbecue with with like a grate that you're talking about, and kind of like a crank on the side.
A crank, yes.
And I remember seeing them in the parking lots of like the Albertsons. And, it was just, that was how the barbecue was done. And it makes this incredible smell that fills the air and makes you want to just go nuts. They also have in San Luis Obispo every Thursday night, the farmer's market. I don't know what's going on with the farmer's market in COVID times. That's a whole nother story. Mm-hmm. But it's another one of the attractions, I think, of San Luis Obispo. And again, that tri-tip, I think, to me, it filled the air with that smell, and it flavored the experience of farmer's market for me. So I think I actually started off with sort of the misconception that you probably see a lot. I said, oh, tri-tip, that's Santa Maria style barbecue. But so it's not, what's the difference between the tri-tip and, just Santa Maria style barbecue?
Yeah, well, I won't say that tri-tip isn't Santa Maria style barbecue. There are people that, of course, with any kind of foodway like this, there are arguments and there's tension. I mean, people have
lots of opinions. Yes.
They've lost relationships with family members over this kind of thing, as with any really like deeply ingrained foodway. But the tri-tip thing came up because there was a Stater Brothers grocery store on Main Street that a guy was a butcher, behind the counter, had this leftover cut of meat, and it was the tri-tip. And he, for whatever reason, maybe he ran out of the sirloin or something like that, but he put it on a spit in the back, and that's what he used he was selling these tri-tips. And so that cut was so cheap that, I love those stories about necessity is the mother of invention. Mm-hmm. That's so much of food is that. And in this case, for whatever reason, this guy didn't have the sirloin. And so he went with the tri-tip cut. The irony, of course, being that markets being what they are, tri-tip is now one of the more expensive cuts here because it's what everybody uses when they barbecue.
Yeah. Well, can you indulge me and sort of talk about what I know of the Santa Maria style barbecue, the tri-tip sandwich? So my head automatically goes to, if you haven't been to San Luis Obispo and you haven't been able to visit some of the fantastic eateries there's this place that's kind of, I think, very famous among the Central Coast, which is, of course, Firestone Grill. And if you ever go to visit this place, they're known for their tri-tip sandwich. There is always, I have never not had a line at Firestone. There's always a line out the door and around the block. What can you tell me about the Firestone tri-tip sandwich?
Listen to you. You want me to send you one right now? I can smell it on you.
I miss them. They're so good. To me, I think that the hallmark is the bread. It's sort of this tri-tip that's, maybe you can talk about too, it's like a dry tri-tip, but it has a barbecue sauce on it, which isn't, of course, all Santa Maria style barbecue. And it's served on this.
Wait, sorry.
Oh, tell me. Yeah.
No. Santa Maria style barbecue does not use a sauce.
Exactly.
Firestone does. Yeah. Oh, is that what you're saying?
Yes. So I think Santa Maria style barbecue is just the dry barbecue, right?
Yeah, it is.
And then this tri-tip sandwich that I'm drooling over does have a barbecue sauce on it.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I think, does that then become, when I think of a tri-tip sandwich, that's what I stack everything up against. What are your thoughts on this sandwich?
Well, I know. And that sandwich, I think I probably have it once every couple of years. I really don't eat that sandwich very often, but God, it's so good. It's so good.
It's so good.
They do such a good job. And I think you're right. I mean, I'm a bread person. So that French roll that's like pillowy soft, when you look at it, it really doesn't look like much. I mean, it's like white and brown food, which always to me, I'm like, I'd rather have something with more color. But then you eat this thing and it's just super tender. Really, I mean, Firestone has always been a really good value as well. You think about the things that they're selling, so much of it is beef based. And it's the reason you know about it as a college student is it was affordable, right? I mean, It was something you could eat going out. My favorite thing at Firestone is actually their tri-tip Cobb salad.
Oh,
which uses the cast off ends of the tri-tip as the meat in the salad. And it's seasoned. Santa Maria style barbecue is only ever seasoned with salt, pepper, and garlic salt. garlic powder. You never have any paprika or chili powder. Some people start to mess with that. And no, the true thing and what Firestone uses is the pepper, salt, and garlic powder.
Because, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because you can go to your grocery store, and I was so offended when I saw a shaker of Santa Maria style seasoning. But I don't think that's missing the point, because it's a style of cooking. So you can't, it's like adobo, in my opinion. You can't put adobo seasoning on something and it's suddenly adobo. So in my mind, and you tell me if this is an incorrect philosophy, but you can't just put Santa Maria style seasoning on something and call it Santa Maria style barbecue.
Nope. It's about the way it's cooked. It's about the way it's cooked. It has to, I mean, the reason there is that the crank and the grate, and you were right. I should go back. You said they're really, really big barbecues, and you are right. I mean, they have attachments for Weber style grills now where you could do it at home. But the point of the barbecue is not to do it for your family. You ask any old guy who's been working on crews for Santa Maria style barbecue, and they will tell you it's about hospitality and it's about feeding a crowd. It's about feeding, the old Santa Maria Club, which is really where this all got, codified. It became a thing in the mid last century, was, upwards of 800 meals. They will feed, they've been to Washington, D.C., they've been up to the Cow Palace in San Francisco. These crews know how to feed a crowd. But like you were saying, it's not just the seasoning. You can't throw the seasoning on anything and call it that. It's three components. The thing that's important is that low and slow, grate over the coals, and really you bring it in close to the coals to begin with to sear it, and then you ratchet it up and it sits high for an hour and a half sometimes for big cuts. So the best place to go for Santa Maria style barbecue, the real place to go, is Jocko's in Nipomo, which is famous.
Oh yeah.
And that could not be more of a hole in the wall. It has zero ambiance, and I love it for that so much.
Oh yeah, I love it. And I think growing up in Virginia, which was a very different kind of country, and then coming out and finding the sort of Western cowboy scene, it was just a whole different vibe. And I think the Jackos of the world, the McClintocks, they just encapsulate that California cowboy in ambiance, in taste. Everything's different. So not something that can easily be recreated at home. That makes me feel better.
No,
it makes my this is not an untrue story, but I have actually driven from Los Angeles to San Luis Obispo to get that sandwich and come back in the same day. I'm horrified to admit it, but it was totally worth it. And I wouldn't even say I wouldn't do it again. My grandparents are there, so I can stop in and say hello. But yeah, totally worth it. And glad to hear that it's not something I can recreate at home. But so in addition to, the center, the star of the Santa Maria style barbecue, of course, the meat, there must be something to the experience of eating it, which is, as you're talking about, in large groups, very hospitable. Yeah. What about the sides? Are there some traditional sides that go with barbecue?
Yeah. And this is a really interesting thing, because the Santa Maria Chamber of Commerce did something very forward thinking. I want to say it was like 1978. They saw that this foodway was starting to die off. The Santa Maria Club had been closed. There are a lot of reasons that Santa Maria has suffered as a city. And so they started to see that this old way of life was starting to kind of drift away. They decided to copyright the menu, the Santa Maria style menu. And that's really something that most chambers of commerce would not do. So it's very cool that it's laid out quite specifically. So you've got the top sirloin or tri-tip for those who came a little after. For you. No,
less civilized.
For you and everybody else. Yeah. And then the sides, the famous pinquito beans are kind of a smaller pink version of a pinto bean, and they're indigenous to the Santa Maria Valley. They are something you can order dry and get online. But again, you're never making a little pot of pinquito beans. You're making a vat of them. And they usually have little flecks of tri-tip in them, and they're kind of on the sweet side, but they're not like baked beans. They are so delicious, but they're small, and they are critical to being served alongside the meat. And then there's always French bread and a little like a little wilted salad.
Yeah. Pathetic salad. Yeah. I know. Yeah. The French bread though, is it traditionally garlic bread, or is it just regular? I feel like I'm always having garlic bread when I have barbecue.
I think a lot of places do garlic bread. I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure it's just gobs of butter.
Yes, that's what makes it taste so good. Garlic or not, it's the butter. It's the
So,
butter.
so good. Yeah, and grilled on the grate with the other stuff.
So that when you bite into it, you get that crunch and a little bit of the butter like seeps out with the crunch. It's an experience.
I know. And then the salsa tends to be pretty important too. And we put the salsa on our sirloin. That's the way that we eat it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And coffee. They always have coffee at the end.
Really?
Yeah.
I've not
It's very
experienced this.
civilized.
Yeah. Where would you experience this? At a Jocko's, or just you'd have to know somebody who happens to be hosting an 800 people plus Santa Maria style barbecue?
Yeah, I mean, in the old days, meaning when I was a kid, like you, I'm thinking about, Broadway it was the main thoroughfare in Santa Maria. And this happened all over. This happened in San Luis Obispo, Arroyo Grande, Orchid, where there would be Santa Maria style crews with their big rigs out on the sides of the street doing fundraisers. I remember Santa Maria on a Saturday afternoon on Broadway is just choked with smoke, like a good kind of smoke. You can buy your little meal and sit in the park or sit on the curb or drive away with it. And, it's like $8-10 for this meal that supports the Boys and Girls Club or whatever. The hospitality is a huge part of the Santa Maria style tradition, and so is charity and giving back. So they were set up to do huge numbers of meals, and that is not so much the case anymore. I don't know if it's zoning or permits or what, but they don't do it on the side of the street anymore. But there is a place. It's a secret place. I don't even know how much.
Secret?
I don't know how much I can say, but there is a group of people who meet once a month, 10 months out of the year in Santa Maria on different ranches, and they can have up to 800 people there. They do a big old style. They pull out the big rig and they do an old style barbecue fiesta kind of thing. And I got to go. You have to be a member.
I was going to say, how does one get invited to these amazing fiesta style barbecues?
You have to be invited by someone.
Secret society.
Secret society that I had heard about, and I ended up kind of infiltrating. I was writing a story about it, and I stood by the barbecue, and I was fed the tri-tip tips, the sirloin tips, for probably 2 hours talking to a bunch of these guys, and my stomach hurt so bad that night. No, it's okay. It's just a lot. I mean, I ate a lot, but it's one of the most beautiful traditions, really.
Yeah.
And one of the only, when you think about California, there are very few that we have. There's like Cioppino in San Francisco, sourdough in San Francisco, but otherwise there aren't many that are really like home to here.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty special thing.
It is. And I can hear it in your voice talking with you right now, and certainly on your podcast. Do you ever worry that you're going to run out of content to cover in the Central Coast?
Honestly, yes. It's a small place.
Yeah.
It's a small place. And from listening that I focus on one, maybe two people, and I like to talk about what goes on behind the food. And so Santa Maria style barbecue, there is a lot of content there. There is so much. I mean, there's the sad side to it too, really sad. Santa Maria was a thriving place. And it is still a successful place, but not in the same way. It's the largest city by far on the Central Coast, bigger than Santa Barbara. And it's had a lot of, kind of fits and starts. The mall sits there almost empty.
Yeah.
Santa Maria was rich with oil, had tons of money because of oil, and a lot of those rigs stopped and mineral stripped out there. There's the big Vandenberg Air Force Base was set up to be the next big hub for like the Challenger shuttle, those kinds of things. And that died off when the Challenger fell. So there were all these it's going to be in the space race. It's going to be oil. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. And the major, I think the biggest nail in the coffin of Santa Maria was when they put the freeway in. They diverted traffic from Broadway. Broadway had everything going on, including the Santa Maria Club, the Santa Maria Inn, where people would stop on their way up to Hearst Castle to stay overnight, Marilyn Monroe, Joe DiMaggio. So it was this very starry kind of place. And then they diverted the freeway out in 1963, and now nobody has to go through, and
Yeah.
it lost its mojo. So it's still a wonderful place, agriculturally so significant, a fruit bowl for the nation, really, in many ways, but it doesn't have the same starlit kind of quality that it did. And Santa Maria Style BBQ is a huge piece that can get lost with all of that.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you shared some of the history with us. I can't believe how much I learned. I thought we were going to talk about, food from like a eating perspective. And it's exactly the reason why I love people like you and a podcast like this that tell these stories that are so important, because food is such a critical part of culture wherever you are in the world. But this idea that a city might be faltering, but something that's known for its a very particular culinary addition to the world could be potentially the thing that's the saving grace even for Santa Maria, if we want to flip it to the optimistic side.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that. And by telling this story of this foodway, that's the best way to get people to enjoy it. Everybody loves, most people love the taste of Santa Maria style barbecue. I think they can taste that it's different. A lot of people like that it's dry. They don't want the barbecue sauce. My husband being one of them, he is very opinionated about that.
So he likes it dry, not even any barbecue sauce?
No. And that's a real hallmark of West Coast barbecue is that it's not the saucy pulled pork. It's not the saucy ribs. It is this one cut or two cuts based on, where you're coming from. And it's dry and it's just low and slow and succulent based on the way that it's cooked.
Right. I think the seasoning is dry, but the cut is not. It's a moist piece of meat that is, you just kind of melts in your mouth for lack of a better way to describe it. I think some people hear dry barbecue and think that it's going to be dry in their mouth. And that just could not be farther from the experience that you're going to have.
Right. And that all said, I love Texas style barbecue. I love Memphis. I love brisket. I love, Kansas City. I love it all. But this is our home. This is the style we do here. Yeah,
definitely. And to the emotional side of things, when I bite into a Firestone sandwich, for example, I'm there. It is very, to me, it's so nostalgic. Every bite is, I taste the Central Coast when I'm eating that. It's a very specific food, and I hope that it stays that way for as long as we can keep the Santa Maria style barbecue on the map and as popular as it should be, because it's so worth it to talk about and to try and to keep alive.
I don't think Firestone's going anywhere, girl. I think it's there for the long haul.
Yeah, they're incredible. People always confuse Firestone Grill with Firestone Walker Brewery.
Yes.
And they're not actually the same. Firestone used to actually be, is this right, that the Firestone Grill in San Luis Obispo used to be a tire shop?
Yes, I believe so. It was a Firestone, tire shop. And the Firestone Walker family is tied to the Firestone tire shop. But the only reason Firestone Grill is called that is based on what it used to be.
Yeah. It's a small world, and the Firestone connection runs deep to the Central Coast, both through the brewery, which I know he's been a guest. You've had them on your own podcast. Great episode, guys, if you want to hear about the beer that is worldwide now, but the 805 beer, which I love. You have a great episode on your show with them as well. So before we wrap up here today, I mean, I could keep talking about all the foods of the Central Coast, but I want to give you an opportunity to tell us about your dream dinner. And it can be from anywhere in the world, but if you could have dinner with anyone from any place, any time in the world for dinner tonight, what would it be?
I think, just recreating a great memory. A lot of people want to eat, their mom's, I don't know, chicken and biscuits or something like that. And I love that. I love when people want, for you, the Firestone sandwich, it brings you back to a place and a time. For me, absolutely the best meals have been the ones based on who was with me and also the quality of ingredients, and not going to lie, what booze was involved. I mean, 100%. So I would say, my husband and I had this unbelievable meal in Italy. We were working on a farm. And when I say working on a farm, I mean like the hard stuff, picking tomatoes for 10 hours a day and our hands are black and we're sweating under, just really extreme conditions compared to where we live now and the kinds of jobs we have now. But we were working so hard on this one farm, and they had an agriturismo, they had a little inn and a restaurant that could only feed, maybe 10 people a night. And they had a cancellation from a couple, and they invited us to dine at the restaurant where our bosses, would be waiting on us.
Wow.
And it was one of the most generous and lovely experiences. They could not help themselves. They must have brought out, I'd have to confirm with Jake, but it had to have been at least 12 courses.
Wow.
And the most beautiful thing I ate was this handmade ravioli with some kind of like a winter squash inside and a sage butter top. It was just
sage butter that gets you. Oh, yum.
It was unbelievable. And some sort of gorgeous dessert. I mean, I can't even remember, but I just remember they kept bringing the wine, and they kept everything was so fresh and new. And we were able to just be husband and wife and not employees. We got to feel kind of fancy. That's the meal I would recreate.
Oh, wow. What a wonderful experience. And you know what? You're so right. It's always less about the actual food. Well, I shouldn't say always, but it's, to me anyway, the experience, the place that you're in, the company that you keep. That's what I think stays with you throughout as we go through the different meals of our lives. The experiences that really touched our hearts are the ones that stick with us. So,
yes.
Oh wow, I would eat that in a heartbit. Italy is one of the places I've yet to visit, and it is top on my bucket list for when the world, I'll say normalizes. I can't even say goes back because we'll say normalizes.
Yes, I know. And I've been having a lot of heartache about not being able to go. We try to go. I mean, we've been several times, and it's like when you can't have something, you want it even more.
Oh yeah, story of life. Life.
Totally.
Life law.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, Jaime, it's been such a pleasure to chat with you. I can't recommend your podcast enough. But outside of your podcast, where can people find you and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I write a couple of food columns. I write one for 805 Living magazine. It's a Southern California magazine. And then I write for our local Slow Life magazine about different places to eat out and about here. Yeah, and then I do some travel writing and things like that when I get the good chance. But otherwise, you can find me in the middle of Slow.
Wonderful. Well, we'll link to your podcast for sure in our show notes. And also, I think you have an Instagram account that I'll send people to as well. And really great. You tell amazing food stories. I love your perspective. And I've loved chatting with you. So thank you so much for being here with us today. And I can't wait to see you on the Central Coast.
Yeah, see you soon.
All right, everybody, that's our show for this week. Thank you so much for listening along with us. I hope you enjoyed a little visit to the Central Coast of California with us. I love that place more than anything, and I hope that if you haven't already, that you someday get a chance to visit the Central Coast and hopefully try out some of that delicious Santa Maria style barbecue. Hey, please make sure you're subscribed to the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're at it, share this episode or the whole show with someone you know loves food as much as you do. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. We'll see you right back here for the next episode.